Right, let's cut the crap and dive into some seriously geeky shit today.
Yeah.
I'm talking about mobile operating systems. And no, I'm not talking about that boring iPhone versus Android bullshit. We're going way off the beaten path today.
Okay.
Into the land of the weird and the wonderful.
Most people are stuck in that Apple-Google loop.
Yeah.
Completely oblivious to the wild stuff out there. But trust me, there are mobile OBs out there.
Oh, really?
That are so fucked up, so different.
Okay.
They make Android look like a goddamn cave painting.
Okay, you've got my attention.
Gook.
Let's talk about one of these fucked up mobile OCs.
Yeah.
What do we got on the docket today?
We're diving into Ubuntu Touch.
Ubuntu Touch.
It's an operating system that's
The hell is that?
a total mindfuck.
Okay.
In a good way, of course.
Sounds like some kind of hippie yoga app.
Not even close.
Okay.
Ubuntu is a flavor of Linux.
Yeah.
We're the open source operating system beloved by nerds everywhere.
Okay, so it's a phone for the penguin-loving pocket protector crowd. What makes it so fucked up?
Well, Ubuntu Touch had this insanely ambitious goal.
All right.
They wanted to create this convergence thing
Right.
where one OS could run on all your devices, phones, tablets, even desktops. Imagine your phone transforming into a full-blown computer just by plugging it into a monitor. Pretty wild, right?
Convergence, huh? That sounds like some serious bullshit. Did they actually pull it off?
Let's just say the reality was a little less magical than the vision.
Okay.
They managed to get it working on a handful of devices.
Right.
But the grand plan never quite materialized.
Really?
And to make matters worse, Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu,
Right.
bailed on the whole project back in 2017. They basically said, "See ya later, nerds."
So they just abandoned it. What a bunch of dicks. What happened?
Canonical claimed they lost faith in the market,
Oh.
didn't think they could make money off it.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. The story didn't end there. The community, these die-hard Ubuntu Touch fans, refused to let it die. They formed this group called UBports,
Okay.
picked up the pieces, and kept the dream alive.
So a bunch of tech zombies resurrected a dead OS. That's some serious dedication.
Yeah.
They must really love this Ubuntu Touch thing.
Yeah.
Tell me, what makes it so special? What sets it apart from the usual smartphone crap?
The first thing you'll notice is the user interface.
Right.
It's completely different from anything you've ever seen.
Really?
There are no buttons, no menus, just pure, unadulterated swiping. You control everything by swiping in from the edges of the screen. It's like conducting a digital orchestra with your thumbs.
Swiping for everything sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
I can just imagine myself accidentally deleting all my shit with a stray swipe.
It's not as chaotic as it sounds.
Okay.
It's actually quite intuitive once you get the hang of it.
Right.
And instead of the usual app grid, they have these things called scopes. Imagine dynamic dashboards that pull information from different sources based on what you're doing. It's like having a personal assistant built into your phone.
Scopes, huh? That's a new one. Give me an example. How does the scope thing actually work?
Let's say you're into music.
Okay.
The music scope aggregates tracks from your local storage and any streaming services you use.
Right.
It's all there in one place, ready to go. No more jumping between different apps.
Okay, that actually sounds pretty cool. No more app grid clusterfuck. I might be able to get behind that. What else you got?
Then there's Side Stage. It's their take on multitasking. You can run phone apps and tablet apps side by side. Imagine browsing the web while taking notes, all on your phone. It's a clever way to maximize your screen real estate.
All right, this Ubuntu Touch thing is starting to sound a little less like a fever dream and a little more like an actual usable phone. But let's cut the crap and talk about the elephant in the room apps.
Okay,
Does this fringe OS even have any apps worth a damn?
that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, the app selection is a bit limited. It's the classic chicken and egg problem.
Right.
Developers don't want to make apps for a platform with few users. And users don't want to use a platform with few apps.
So it's basically a phone for checking email,
Yeah.
and that's about it.
Not quite.
Okay.
They do have a decent suite of core apps.
Yeah.
A browser, email client, calendar.
Yeah.
Even a terminal emulator for the real hardcore Linux nerds out there.
Terminal emulator, Jesus Christ. You weren't kidding about catering to the nerds. Okay, but seriously, is it even usable without all the popular apps?
Right.
What about the UB Ports crew? Do they even know what they're doing, keeping this Frankenstein OS alive?
They're a dedicated bunch. UBports releases regular updates and is constantly working on new features. They're even porting Ubuntu Touch to new devices.
Wow.
Community development has its challenges,
Sure.
but they're making it work.
So what about this whole convergence pipe dream? Did that ever actually amount to anything? Did anyone actually ship a phone with Ubuntu Touch on it?
There were a few brave souls who dared.
Okay.
There were the BQ Aquarius phones
Q Aquarius.
and a Meizu tablet. They were decent devices, but they never really gained much traction.
Never heard of them. Sounds like a couple of knockoff brands you'd find on Wish.com.
Yeah, mainstream adoption was always a long shot.
Right.
But that doesn't mean Ubuntu Touch is a complete failure.
So who the hell is actually using this thing? Who's buying these obscure phones?
It appeals to a specific type of person, someone who values privacy, open source software, and having control over their technology. People who are a little different.
Different? You mean like the tinfoil hat wearing, government tracking obsessed types?
Hey, not all of them.
All right.
But yeah, there are definitely some privacy-conscious users who are drawn to Ubuntu Touch because it's not tied to Google or Apple,
Right.
the data-hungry behemoths of the tech world.
Okay. I'm starting to see the appeal. So what kind of phones are we talking about here? What can you actually run this Ubuntu Touch thing on?
There's the Librem 5, a phone designed with privacy in mind,
Librem 5.
and the Pine phone, a super tinker-friendly device popular with the open source crowd. Both offer Ubuntu Touch support.
So basically, we're talking about phones for the paranoid and the tech-savvy. Niche devices for niche users.
Pretty much.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means Ubuntu Touch has found its own little corner of the market
Right.
and is catering to a specific audience.
All right, so let me get this straight. Ubuntu Touch is basically this weird niche mobile OS for privacy freaks and Linux nerds.
That's a pretty accurate summary. It's definitely not for everyone.
Well, at least it's not another boring-ass iPhone.
That's one way to put it.
So we've talked about the history, the features, the pros, and the cons of Ubuntu Touch. But what does it actually feel like to use this thing? Is it any good?
Well, good is subjective.
Okay.
It depends on what you're looking for in a mobile OS.
Oh.
But I can give you my personal take on it.
All right, hit me with your expert opinion. What's the Ubuntu Touch experience really like?
The first thing you'll notice is that it's different.
Okay.
Really different. The UI is unique and takes some getting used to.
Right.
But once you get the hang of it, it's quite refreshing. It's very gesture-based, and there's a real sense of fluidity to the way you navigate around the OS.
So it's not just a reskinned version of Android. It actually has its own distinct personality.
Exactly. It feels like a...
But if you're willing to make some compromises, you can still have a perfectly functional and enjoyable experience.
Exactly. And for some people, the trade-offs are worth it. They're willing to sacrifice some app availability in exchange for the privacy and control that Ubuntu Touch offers.
So who do you think Ubuntu Touch is really for? Is it just for hardcore Linux enthusiasts, or is there a broader appeal?
I think it definitely appeals to people who are tech-savvy
Okay.
and who value open source software and privacy. But I also think it can be a good option for people who are just looking for something different from the mainstream, something that gives them more control over their device and their data.
So it's not just about being a techie, it's also about having a certain mindset, a desire to break away from the norm.
Exactly. And that's what I find so intriguing about Ubuntu Touch.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that there are alternatives out there. It's a reminder that we don't have to settle for the status quo.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Ubuntu Touch. But I'm still curious about one thing. What's the future hold for this little underdog of an OS?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's hard to say for sure.
Okay.
The future of any mobile OS is uncertain,
Right.
especially one that's as niche as Ubuntu Touch.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, the community behind it is incredibly passionate and dedicated, and they're not going down without a fight.
Yeah.
They're constantly working on improving the OS,
Yeah.
porting it to new devices, and expanding the app ecosystem.
So there's still hope for Ubuntu Touch.
Yeah.
It might not ever become the next Android or iOS, but it could carve out a nice little niche for itself.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe one day it'll even surprise us and make a real dent in the mainstream market.
Well, one thing's for sure. It's been a wild ride learning about this weird and wonderful mobile OS. So let's raise a glass to Ubuntu Touch, the underdog, the rebel, the OS that dared to be different.
Cheers to...
All right, folks, that's it for part 1 of our deep dive into the wacky world of Ubuntu Touch. We'll be back in part 2 to explore some of the more technical aspects of this unconventional OS. So grab a beer, take a piss, and we'll see you on the other side.
See ya! Welcome back to the deep dive, where we're dissecting this fascinatingly weird mobile OS known as Ubuntu Touch.
Okay.
Last time we talked about its history, the interface, the overall vibe.
Right.
Now let's get a bit more technical and see what makes this thing tick.
All right, Professor, let's pop the hood and get our hands dirty.
Yeah.
What's going on under the surface of this Ubuntu Touch thing? Is it just Android with a new paint job?
Not even close.
Okay.
At its core, Ubuntu Touch is built on the same foundation as regular Ubuntu,
Right.
the Linux-based operating system.
So it's the real deal OG Linux, not some watered-down, Google-fied version.
That means it inherits the stability, the security, and the open-source nature of Linux.
Okay.
All good things, if you ask me.
What else makes it different from the Android masses?
Well, unlike Android, which is heavily reliant on Java, Ubuntu Touch uses a different programming language called Qt.
Qt, huh?
It's known for its performance flexibility and its ability to create beautiful, responsive interfaces.
Sounds like some kind of futuristic sex toy.
Maybe in another dimension.
Okay.
But in this one, it's a powerful toolkit for developers creating apps for Ubuntu Touch.
So there's hope for a brighter future app-wise. Could this be the thing that saves Ubuntu Touch from app oblivion?
And because it's cross-platform, apps can be more easily ported to other operating systems.
Oh, right.
It's definitely a possibility.
Right.
But remember, the app situation is a chicken and egg scenario.
Right.
We've got to get more users on board to attract more developers.
Right.
But let's not dwell on that.
Yeah.
We're here for the cool tech shit, right?
Yeah, I'm right. So hit me with it, Professor. What makes Ubuntu Touch so special from a tech perspective? What kind of geeky goodness are we talking about here?
One of the most intriguing aspects is their approach to convergence.
Convergence.
Remember how they wanted to create one OS to rule them all?
Yeah.
Well, they actually made some pretty damn impressive progress.
Wait, are you telling me this little phone OS can power an actual desktop computer? Get the fuck out of here.
It might sound like science fiction,
Right.
but it's closer to reality than you think.
Okay.
They developed this technology called Mir,
Right.
a display server that allows Ubuntu Touch to adapt to different screen sizes and input methods.
A display server. Sounds like something out of Star Trek.
Mm.
Can you break it down for us simpletons? What does this Mir thing actually do?
Think of it as the bridge between your phone and whatever screen you plug it into.
Okay.
It allows Ubuntu Touch to shape-shift its interface,
Uh-huh.
going from a phone layout to a tablet layout to a full-blown desktop experience.
So you're telling me I can plug my Ubuntu Touch phone into a monitor, hook up a keyboard and mouse, and boom, instant desktop PC.
All on the same device.
That's pretty fucking cool.
That's the general idea.
Okay.
It's not perfect. There are still some wrinkles to iron out, but the potential is definitely there.
They were pretty close to achieving their convergence dream then. What a shame that Canonical choked and abandoned it.
Agreed. It was a bold vision.
Yeah.
But as we've discussed, the community swooped in to save the day.
Right.
UBports has been doing some incredible work to keep Ubuntu Touch alive and kicking.
So they're doing a good job.
It's a testament to the power of open source, really.
The little OS, they could, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about Convergence Q, this Mir thing. What else is there to know about Ubuntu Touch from a technical standpoint?
Well, one thing that really sets it apart is their approach to security.
Security, huh?
They've incorporated a bunch of features that make Ubuntu Touch one of the most secure mobile operating systems on the market.
So this thing is like Fort Knox for my phone. Tell me more. Professor, I'm all ears.
Well, maybe not Fort Knox,
Oh.
but it's a damn sight more secure than your average Android device.
All right.
One of the key features is something called OPARMR,
A Parmer.
a mandatory access control system. Basically, it means apps are only allowed to access the specific resources they need to function and nothing more.
It's like each app is locked in its own little cell. Even if one goes rogue, it can't fuck up the whole system, right?
Exactly. It's an incredibly effective way to minimize security risks.
Okay.
And to add another layer of protection, Ubuntu Touch also has a built-in firewall to guard against network attacks.
Wait, a firewall on a phone? I've never even heard of that. Is that even a thing?
It's not common,
Okay.
but it shows you how seriously the Ubuntu Touch developers take security. And to top it all off, they use full disk encryption,
Okay.
which protects your data even if your device gets lost or stolen.
So basically this thing is a digital fortress. I'm starting to feel safer just talking about it.
It's definitely a step in the right direction for mobile security,
Right.
for privacy-conscious folks. That's a huge selling point.
Okay, the tech is impressive, the security is tight. But what of the human element? You mentioned the community earlier. What's the deal with these Ubuntu Touch folks? What makes them tick?
The community is what truly makes this project special.
Really?
These are some of the most passionate, dedicated people I've ever met in the tech world.
Wow.
They believe in the vision of a truly open and free mobile operating system, and they're willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to make it a reality.
So they're not just your typical techies who like to tinker with gadgets in their spare time. They're on a mission.
They're on a fucking crusade, my friend. They see Ubuntu Touch as more than just a phone OS.
Yeah.
It's a way to challenge the status quo, to
What?
create a more democratic and ethical tech landscape.
All right, so they're passionate, idealistic, but can they actually walk the walk? Are they any good at what they do?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They're some of the most talented, dedicated developers I've ever come across.
Really?
They're constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Ubuntu Touch.
So they're not just sitting around stroking their beards and dreaming about a better world. They're actually getting shit done.
You got it.
Okay.
And they're doing it all in their spare time, mind you.
Wow.
This is a community-driven project.
Right.
No big corporations funding this thing.
Wow.
It's all fueled by the passion and dedication of volunteers.
That's pretty fucking inspiring. It takes a special kind of person to dedicate so much time and energy to a project like this. Okay, Professor, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room again. Those damn apps.
Yeah.
How are they planning to fix this app drought? Are they just crossing their fingers and hoping developers will magically appear?
Hope is a good thing.
Yeah.
But they're not just sitting around waiting for a miracle.
Okay.
They're actively trying to make Ubuntu Touch more appealing to developers.
So what's the plan? Are they bribing them with pizza and beer?
Maybe a little.
Okay.
But they're also taking a more strategic approach. They're creating a solid foundation for app development, making it as painless as possible for developers to port their existing apps to Ubuntu Touch.
So they're making the platform more developer-friendly, smart move.
Yes.
But what about native apps?
Right.
The kind of apps that are specifically designed for Ubuntu Touch.
They're working on that too.
Okay.
They've already got a decent set of core apps.
Yep.
A browser email, client, calendar, file manager,
Yeah.
even that terminal emulator we talked about.
Yeah, they love their terminal emulators, don't they?
Great.
But I guess that's a good sign, right? Shows they're committed to the Linux core. So what else is on the menu? What kind of native apps are they cooking up?
They're developing more specialized apps.
Okay.
Things like a music player, a video player, even a note-taking app.
Right.
Trying to cover all the bases and provide users with a well-rounded experience.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough, though, building an app ecosystem from scratch. What about the bigger picture? Where do they go from here? What's the future of Ubuntu Touch?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The mobile OS landscape is constantly changing. It's hard to predict what the future holds.
So it's a gamble, a leap of faith.
You could say that,
Okay.
but I'm optimistic.
Right?
The Ubuntu Touch community is fiercely passionate and unbelievably dedicated.
Yeah.
They're not going down without a fight.
So they're in it for the long haul.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what makes this project so damn inspiring.
Right.
It's proof that open source has power and that a better world is possible.
Well said, Professor. We've talked about the tech, the community, the future of Ubuntu Touch.
Yeah.
But there's still one burning question we need to address.
And what is that?
Is this thing actually any good? Is it worth ditching your iPhone or Android phone for this weird little underdog OS?
The age-old question, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Exactly. Let's get down to brass tacks, Professor. Is Ubuntu Touch worth making the switch?
The answer, as always, is it depends.
On what?
It depends on what you value in a mobile OS.
Okay.
Your priorities, your level of tech savviness.
So there's no easy answer. No one-size-fits-all solution.
Sadly, no.
Okay.
But I can give you my personal perspective.
All right, lay it on me, Professor. Is Ubuntu Touch worth the plunge?
If privacy and security are your top priorities,
Okay.
then Ubuntu Touch is definitely worth considering.
Right.
It's one of the most secure mobile operating systems out there. And it's not beholden to any of the big tech companies that are constantly sucking up your data.
So this is the phone for the paranoid, the privacy-obsessed, the tinfoil hat brigade.
Hey, no judgment here.
Okay.
But yes, if you're concerned about your digital privacy, Ubuntu Touch is a great option.
Okay, privacy is a big plus.
Right.
But what else is there to love about this weird little OS? What's the actual user experience like?
Personally, I love the interface.
Okay.
It's so different from anything else on the market.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly intuitive once you get the hang of it.
So it's not just an Android clone with a different skin. It actually feels like a totally different animal.
It's all about those gestures, remember? There's a real flow to the way you navigate. It's quite elegant, really.
Okay. privacy unique interface. What else? What are the other selling points?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also a big fan of the open source nature of the project.
Oh, okay.
It's reassuring to know that the code is publicly available.
Right.
And that anyone can contribute to its development.
So you're not just a user, you're a potential contributor.
Yeah.
You can help shape the future of the OS.
Exactly.
Okay.
It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger, something meaningful.
All right. Privacy unique interface, open source. This thing is starting to sound pretty damn tempting. But let's not forget about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Those damn apps, or lack thereof.
Right.
How much of a deal breaker is this app situation, really?
Ah, yes. The eternal struggle of any niche operating system.
So how bad is it, really?
It all comes down to your usage habits.
Okay.
If you're addicted to Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all those mainstream apps, well, you're going to be disappointed. But if you mainly use your phone for basic stuff like browsing email, taking notes, then you can totally get by with what's available.
So it's all about setting realistic expectations.
Right.
You're not going to get the same app smorgasbord as you would with the big guys.
Right. You have to be willing to make some compromises.
Right.
But for some people, the trade-offs are worth it.
Yeah.
They're willing to sacrifice some app convenience in exchange for the privacy, security, and freedom that Ubuntu Touch offers.
So it's a trade-off, a balancing act.
Yeah.
You got to weigh the pros and cons and see what works for you.
Precisely.
Okay.
The decision to switch to Ubuntu Touch is a personal one. There's no right or wrong answer.
All right, Professor. You've given us a lot to chew on, but let's wrap things up with a final thought. What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive into the world of Ubuntu Touch?
The most important thing to remember is that there are alternatives out there.
Okay.
We don't have to settle for the status quo.
Right.
We don't have to let the big tech companies dictate our choices.
So it's about breaking free from the matrix, taking control of our digital lives.
You got it.
Right.
And Ubuntu Touch is a shining example of that.
Okay.
It reminds us that a better world is possible. A world where we have more control over our technology and our data.
Well said, Professor. All right, folks, that's it for part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Ubuntu Touch. We'll be back in part 3 to explore some real-world use cases for this unconventional OS. So stay tuned, grab another beer, and we'll catch you on the flip side. All right, folks, welcome back to the final chapter of our deep dive into the weird and wonderful world of Ubuntu Touch.
It is pretty weird.
We've talked about the history, the tech, the community, the whole 9 yards.
The whole shebang.
But now let's get down to brass tacks. Who the hell is actually using this thing in the real world? Are we talking about a bunch of neckbeards living in their mom's basement?
Not exactly. You'd probably find a few in the Ubuntu forums, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the Ubuntu Touch community is surprisingly diverse.
Okay, so spill the beans, Professor. Who are these mysterious Ubuntu Touch users?
Well, first and foremost, you've got your hardcore Linux enthusiasts. These are the folks who bleed open source software, live and breathe the command line, dream in code. They're the purists, the pioneers, the digital revolutionaries.
The penguin-loving commandos, I get it. But surely it's not just a bunch of techie weirdos.
Yeah.
Who else is drawn to this fringe OS?
You've also got your privacy-conscious folks.
Okay.
The ones who are sick and tired of big tech's constant surveillance.
Right.
They're the ones who tape over their webcams and use VPNs like it's going out of style.
Yeah.
They value their digital freedom, and they're not afraid to fight for it.
The digital hermits seeking refuge in the open source wilderness.
Got it.
So we've got the hardcore techies and the privacy zealots. Who else is hopping on the Ubuntu Touch train?
Then you've got the curious ones, the adventurers.
Okay.
The folks who are just plain bored with the same old Android and iOS bullshit.
Right.
They're looking for something different, something exciting, something that challenges the status quo.
The rebels, the nonconformists, digital mavericks. I like it. So Ubuntu Touch is like a magnet for the misfits of the mobile world.
You could say that. It's a haven for those who dare to be different.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that all these different groups find something to love about Ubuntu Touch. It's like a digital melting pot of tech-savvy individuals united by their shared desire for something better.
A digital utopia powered by swipes and scopes. Sounds pretty damn idealistic.
Oh.
But let's get real for a second. Where is Ubuntu Touch actually making a difference in the real world?
Well, believe it or not, it's starting to make waves in some unexpected places like the education sector.
Educate, you mean like schools and shit?
Yeah.
You tell me kids are using Ubuntu Touch instead of those overpriced iPads?
Hold your horses.
Okay.
It's not quite a mass exodus from Apple just yet. But Ubuntu Touch is starting to gain traction in schools and universities that are looking for a more affordable and customizable alternative to traditional tablets.
So it's like the Robin Hood of mobile OCs,
Yeah,
stealing from the rich tech giants and giving to the cash-strapped schools.
exactly. And because it's open source, schools can tailor the OS to their specific needs.
Wow.
They can create their own educational apps, and they don't have to worry about getting nickel and dimed by proprietary software licenses.
That's pretty damn cool. So Ubuntu Touch is all about empowering the next generation of tech-savvy kids.
It's about giving them the tools they need to succeed without breaking the bank.
All right, so we've got the education angle. What other unexpected places is Ubuntu Touch popping up?
It's also gaining traction in the developing world.
The developing world. That's interesting. Tell me more.
Well, in many parts of the world, smartphones are the primary means of accessing the internet.
Right.
But traditional smartphones can be prohibitively expensive for a lot of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. A brand new iPhone can cost a fortune, especially in countries where the average income is a fraction of what we're used to here in the West.
Exactly. That's where Ubuntu Touch comes in. Because it runs on relatively low-powered hardware, it can be used on more affordable devices, making smartphones accessible to a wider range of people.
So it's like a digital equalizer, bringing the power of the internet to those who might not otherwise be able to afford it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about democratizing technology and making sure that everyone has access to the information and opportunities that the digital world has to offer.
All right, I'm sold. Ubuntu Touch is officially a force for good in the world. But before we wrap things up, I want to hear your personal take on it.
Okay.
Why are you such a big fan of this little OS?
For me, it boils down to a few key things.
Okay.
First and foremost, I love the philosophy behind it. The idea of a truly open and free mobile operating system. It's a powerful concept and one that I wholeheartedly believe in.
So it's not just about the tech itself. It's about the values, the principles.
Exactly. It's about taking a stand against the walled gardens of Apple and Google and creating a more open and equitable digital landscape.
The digital revolution fought with swipes and scopes. I like it. What else keeps you coming back to Ubuntu Touch?
I'm also a huge believer in the power of community. The Ubuntu Touch community is one of the most passionate and dedicated groups I've ever encountered.
Yeah.
They're the ones who keep this project alive.
Yeah.
They're the ones who push the boundaries of what's possible, and they do it all out of the goodness of their hearts.
The true labor of love. So it's the community, the open source spirit that really sets Ubuntu Touch apart.
It's the driving force behind everything. And lastly, I just love the fact that it's different. It's not afraid to challenge the status quo. It's not afraid to be weird. It's a breath of fresh air in a world of increasingly homogeneous smartphones.
A beautiful freak flag flying high in the face of conformity. I dig it. All right, Professor, we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we let you go, I want to give you one last chance to make your pitch. Why should our listeners give Ubuntu Touch a shot?
If you're tired of the same old smartphone experience, if you value privacy and freedom, if you're looking for something truly different, then give Ubuntu Touch a try.
All right.
It might not be perfect, it might not have all the bells and whistles of the big boys, but it's a damn good OS with a heart of gold.
Okay.
And who knows, it might just surprise you.
All right, folks. There you have it. The case for Ubuntu Touch. The quirky, the unconventional, the OS that dares to be different. We've explored its history, its tech, its community, its impact on the world. And we've learned that sometimes the best things come in small packages. So if you're feeling adventurous, if you're ready to break free from the shackles of the mainstream, give Ubuntu Touch a spin, you might just find yourself pleasantly surprised.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the fascinating world of tech. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay tuned.